it's Elaine, Crazy Quilter on a Bike, and welcome to the Vintage Christmas Sew-Along. So we're going to be starting today, and I thought that I would share some of the information I'm going to give you in the email, also in a video, just so that we can kind of get to know each other a little bit better. So let's get started. Let's have a little tour of the book first. I'm sure that most of you have the book. If you don't have the book, you will need to get the book, as I will be giving you tips on the instructions that are in the book, but I will not be giving you, the exact cutting directions and everything. So you'll have to make sure that you get the book for that. Okay, so in the book, and I'm sure that many of you, if you haven't, have already been through, there are instructions for the blocks. And in the instructions, you're going to get cutting instructions for a 6-inch block, and you'll get cutting instructions for a 12-inch block. The sewing instructions for both blocks will be identical, just the sizes might change, and we're going to talk about that when we get to there. So the first thing you will need to do is to decide the size of the block, and we'll talk about that in a sec. So the first part of the book, as I said, is all about the blocks. And then if you go towards the back of the book, we have some other projects. So here from page 111 onwards are some projects. There's pillows, there's tree skirts or cushions, whatever. So there's a lot of other smaller projects in there, and you can incorporate some of the blocks into it or use the directions that are there. And then if we go to the very end, which is on page 196, page 196, okay. Hard to do this when you're looking at it upside down. Okay, there we go, page 196. So this is the sampler quilt that you will see on the front of the book. So if you want to make all 42 blocks, because there are 42 blocks in the quilt, if you want to make all 42 blocks, these are the 6-inch ones, then you can make this sampler quilt. Now, you don't have to make it exactly the way it is here. You don't have to make that border. You don't have to make all of the blocks. It's going to be up to you to decide what you want to do, because this is your quilt. I'm only going to lead you through with the directions on making the blocks and giving you some tips, but I'll also be talking as we go along with different settings and what you can do with the blocks. And hopefully what we're going to see, because I will create a Facebook page, and so we'll all be able to share the blocks that we're working on, and that you can share your ideas as well to let others know what you're doing. You might be making a quilt for your bed. You might be making just some little table runners or placemats. And so it'll be really neat for us to see what you're going to do with yours, and also your colorway and everything. So that's kind of how it goes. And if we look here, this is basically giving me the fabric requirements for the finishing of this quilt, and the requirements for each block is actually listed with the block. So there is no one area that will say, if you're going to make the sampler quilt, that this is where all the fabric is. So it's kind of it's a good way actually to use your scraps, and then, like I said, get to the yardage for the finishing part of it. So let's go first to the size of the blocks, because that's one of the first things that you're going to need to make a decision on next week. And so these are 2 blocks that I made from Farm Girl Vintage, which is one of Lori Holt's other books. And so this is the pinwheel block, and it's the 6-inch size, 6-inch finished. And this is the same block, but in the 12-inch size. So you can see there's quite a big difference. And personally, I like the 6-inch block. I think it's cute. It is fiddlier, because same pieces, just going to be smaller. So think about that when you're doing it. If you want to learn how to work with little pieces and you've not before, this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So first line of business is going to be decide which blocks you're going to make in which size, and then you can go from there. I did have a student in one of my other classes who made all her blocks 12 inches and then put them together, and it made a king size quilt. So if you want to do that, you can. You can make several quilts. One of the things in these blocks, if you've noticed, is that about half of them, not quite half, are very specific Christmas themes. So there's candy canes and Christmas trees and soldier blocks and whatnot. And then the other half are just a block that she has given a Christmassy name to. So, but they don't actually represent anything Christmas. So you technically don't have to make it a Christmas quilt. You could do whatever you want and not make the Christmas blocks. So that's totally up to you. And that's going to be part of your assignment this week coming, is to figure out what size you're going to make and kind of have an idea what blocks you're going to make, so that when I assign that block, then you'll know whether it's one that you're going to make or not. Now I want to talk a little bit about fabric. So you could just go to your scrap bin and just make the fabrics, or make it scrappy. But when I worked on the Farm Girl Vintage several years ago, I actually had purchased one of Lori Holt's fabric bundles. So this is, I'm not even sure which one this is, but this is one of her fabric bundles. And so I restricted myself to using only the fabric in the bundle or from that collection to make the quilt. And I did find it very restrictive. So for instance, in the Farm Girl Vintage, we made a pumpkin. And in the collection of fabric that I had used, there was only a single orange. And of course, it would have been much nicer if my pumpkin would have had multiple oranges in it. So I took the orange, I cut it up into little squares, and then sewed it back together again. So that's one of the disadvantages, I'll say, of using a bundle like this, is that you might be restricted in your fabric choices and how many you have of a certain color. So be very careful of that when you pick your fabrics. Now what I've decided to do for the Vintage Christmas, and I'm going to do something totally different, and perhaps right or wrong, but I have decided to go with a very neutral palette on the gray side. So you can see here that I have chosen, I've got a bunch of grays that I have chosen. Some of them are, have black and white in them. There's, variations of lights and darks within my grays. So there's a darker gray. I've got some grays with solids, Rita's solids. And then I've got, a few in there. I've even got a couple, has polar bears on it. So you can kind of do whatever you want. Also look at the scale. So you can see the scale of this one here is quite large compared to this. Using this in a 6-inch block, I'm not really going to see a whole lot of the detail, but I'm okay with that. I really am just looking for the color and not so much the pattern. So something to think about when you're choosing your fabrics. I've added a little bit of black, and I have some whites. So hopefully with all of that, I'm going to have enough contrast. Now it's going to be a challenge, I know that, because there are, if I were working with blocks that had no images in them, this would be perfect. And because I do have lots of contrast in there. But if I want my little candy canes, or what else is in there, reindeer, I want them to shine, they may not shine as well if I restrict myself to this palette. So I've decided to add in also some pops of red and green. So I still need to find a couple more reds, and I'm hoping that with all of that, I'm going to have a very successful quilt. I may make a block or two and decide that this isn't working for me. I may have to change it. I don't know. But anyway, that's what I'm going to try. Okay, so to get started, I've gone through the book. I've assigned all the blocks to the weeks. And so how it's going to work is that every 2 weeks, you're going to get an email from me that will tell you what blocks we're working on that week and give you any tips for those 2 blocks. So, and then, you can follow along and keep up to date, which is kind of the point of a sew along. And then you can post your pictures to Facebook so we can all ooh and ah over them. If you have any questions, you can send me a note on Facebook, or you can send me an email, and hopefully we'll be able to answer your questions. And I think that is it. So if there is any other questions, you can always, like I said, send me an email, or put a note on Facebook. Otherwise, let's have fun. I think it's going to be a great project. It's going to be a great year, and I look forward to seeing everybody's finished quilts. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.